Thursday.
Happy
It is
Thursday
pillow
to you.
talk time.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Oh, man, it's pillow talk time. It is November, you guys. Can you believe it?
Oh, man.
It is November. The weather has been warm, hot, cold, warm, hot, cold. It's kind of switching back and forth. It's fair time. I don't know about where you live, but the fair is going on where we live, and it's just been a good time.
You know, and we were supposed to go to the fair tonight, but I didn't get in until late. But we're gonna go on tomorrow night.
It's just
My wife loves.
Some people are haters.
She loves this time of year.
I love fairs and fall festivals, and I love this time of the year for those activities. Now, the cold is another story. The cold is another story. But welcome to Pillow Talk. This is an opportunity for you to take time to share with us and to spend time with us as we talk about different topics that we feel will be a help and a blessing to your marriages and your relationships. It is a way that my husband and I made it through a lot of challenging times. We had to sit down and talk.
Yeah.
Get that pillow and get that blanket and sit back and talk about
talk to each other.
Talk to each other, not at each other, but to each other.
You know, a lot of times go spend a lot of time talking at each other.
But you don't talk to each other. And it's a difference. You know, we were riding the other day and we were just having a heart to heart, and he was like, I'm really enjoying this. Because when you really talk to someone, it feels different than when you're just talking and you're just talking at each other. So we've been talking about, this will go into week 2, how we climbed out of hell. And last week, if you tuned in, we said, you know, we had hell in a lot of different areas. We had hell in our finances.
Because you put it on your Facebook
wall. Pat Bishop, are you talking to somebody outside of the screen? You're breaking the camera rules, Bishop.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have to excuse Bishop. He breaks the rules. We're gonna get a little piece of paper over there and say don't talk to other people.
I apologize.
So we climbed out of hell. We climbed out of financial hell, and we climbed out of, you know, just hell in a lot of different areas.
You know what was funny when we was preparing this topic? I asked you, I said, which hell? I said, we've climbed, I said, we're going to talk about how, we're going to give out a testimony, how we came out of hell. You said, which one? Yeah, so we're going to talk about
I can remember a few over the last, 18 years that we've been married, 22 years that we've been together, dating and so forth. So tonight we're talking about pride.
We're going to talk about pride.
Ooh, is pride causing hell in your marriage and in your relationship?
And this is the area that I had to really grow in. I had to
he had to grow. He had to leap. He had to jump. He had to come up. I don't know much about this area personally, so I'm going to let him do a lot of talking.
Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be sharing 7 things that I think if you are dealing with these 7 areas, but we're going to give you insight on how we overcame these 7 areas. And some of the stuff, like the one we're going to talk about tonight, is going to be a lot of reflection. You're going to have to look at yourself and say, I need to adjust in this particular area.
Can I say something? Do you remember your homework assignment from last week? You're supposed to look inward. Ask God to show you you.
Yeah.
Not show you your spouse or anybody else. And hopefully some people out there did it. Did you really take out some quiet time and ask God to show you yourself?
Right.
And what role you're playing in things. But all right, let's talk about pride time.
So anyway, when we're looking at pride, how do I feel that this can destroy marriage? So I want to go back to our personal testimony, and then we're going to share 3 areas that I feel that pride was destroying us, and then we'll go from there. I should have added another one, but we'll just talk about these 3 areas.
As long as it relates to you, sweetie, you can add as many as you like.
Well, one of them relates to you. I think 2 relates to me, so we'll see. Yeah. Well, so anyway,
you probably won't have time for the one that relates to me.
Here we are. It's 2006. Like I told you earlier last week, I was pastoring a church, and we had my wife was a professor at a college. I was teaching at a high school. We had everything on the surface looked like it was all together. The church was growing. The church was doing fine. My wife's career was just not blossoming. My career is just not blossoming. So on the surface, everything looks okay. Everything looks like it's great. Everything looks like it's going well, But
But under the surface, like that volcano with the lava just bubbling.
It's a tornado.
It just ain't popped just yet.
It's a tornado. It's really bad. I'm coming home. We're passing each other. We're not talking to each other. Mm-hmm. We're not sitting. Like my wife and I do now. We're not discussing about what's going on with our life, and we're not talking to each other. That's Daniel.
That's one of our little sweet pumpkins. That's the 4-year-old sweet sweetie.
Yeah, it's really bad. It's really bad, and so it's not smooth at all. So we're sitting here, and we're dealing with this particular issue, and I'll never forget. It got so bad. I'm sitting in the parking lot. I'm skipping. I'm going to tell you different things as we go throughout, but this one right here is really the point when the rubber meets the road. So I'm sitting in the parking lot. I was teaching at St. Jude Educational Institute, and top 50 high schools in the country, and I'm sitting there in the parking lot, crying my eyes out because my wife said it's over. My marriage is over.
I don't remember those words.
It was over. It was
I
pretty
probably
much over.
said it. I did. I'm sure.
The pride thing that I was dealing with the most is because I had something in my life that I was refusing to let go of. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I was refusing to let go of was destroying my marriage. But I was so prideful in the fact that I wanted her to change and just accept it. But in actuality, what I was holding on to and coveting so much was destroying my home. It was killing my marriage. And I'll never forget, I thank God for my pastor. I was talking to him. He told me, he said, man, you're going to have to let that go. So what was I holding on to? I was holding on to a career that wasn't producing the fruit that I needed in my marriage. And sometimes you can have so many different things going on in your marriage. Sometimes you have to prune in order for life to come back. And this was a particular area in my life that I had to prune and cut back so that it could grow. But I did not want to let it go. And it was killing my home. It was killing my marriage. It was killing my marriage. Listen, at this particular time, you got to understand, with pastoring a church, trying to teach and trying to coach full time. I was working at a hotel on the weekend.
We had a baby.
I was holding on. I had a baby. I was holding on to a career that I was spending about 18 hours a day, honey, away from you. 18 hours a day away from you. And it wasn't producing the fruit that justified the time that I need to be away. Exactly. I was basically volunteering, I think, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, with that coupled with the other responsibilities, the work and the pastoring, he just left no time for us.
But see, I want to be so careful with that because, see, I understand. We have a lot of coaches that listen to this show.
That's also, can I put a caveat?
Yeah, so put a caveat on that because
the caveat was that because we don't want people to take away with the wrong thing. It's, like he said, something, for him it was what the coaching, it was the football. But that doesn't mean football is bad. That doesn't mean coaching is bad. But what it had become in our marriage and in our home and in our life, and it was not what it should have been.
Okay, so let's go back because I want people to understand that. Because, see, like I said, some coaches, this is their career. This is what they do. So here's the point what I'm trying to make is, what I was holding on to wasn't producing fruit in my life. In my situation, it was coaching football. In your situation, it could be a hobby.
It could be a hobby.
It could be hanging out with the boys, playing PlayStation all night. It could be too much church. All right. You on every auxiliary in the church. You're doing everything in the church.
You ministering to everybody.
You minister to everybody, but
the people in your family is going to hell in a handbasket. Your family's falling apart.
You could be doing too much in a church and it still not be producing fruit.
Your children are going like...
Right. God may have called you to be a wonderful Sunday school teacher. I'm using this for an example. But he didn't call you to the jailhouse ministry, the prison ministry. He didn't call you to the nursing home ministry. He didn't call you to feed the homely, go out and do
all by yourself.
He didn't call you to do that.
There are many members in the body.
Yeah, he called you to a particular area. So let me ask you, what are you doing in your life? And you're doing it you think it's out of duty, but it's not producing fruit. And anything in your marriage, it could be hanging out too much. Mm-hmm. It could be going, it could be a lot of different things. What are you holding on to? I was holding on to something that was destroying my home, and my pride, refusing to let it go, was killing my marriage. Mm-hmm. So what are you holding on to? You need to look at your life. You and your wife, you need to look down. Both of you all need to look and see, what am I holding on to? It could be too much work. Mm-hmm. You got too many part-time jobs. You got too many. You working 5 and 6 part-time jobs, and you can't raise your children. You don't have time to read your children a story at night. You don't have time with your spouse. So you have to really look at it and say, what am I doing that I need to cut off? Because my wife had to explain this thing. Explain to me.
I heard you. Maybe nobody else.
Yeah, had to explain to me what it means to prune. And sometimes you have to prune. And that was an area I had to prune. Listen, when I pruned it, I didn't want to let it go. It hurt so bad.
Maybe we have some gardeners out there. If you ever prune, or people that, I love house plants. When you initially prune, it doesn't look pretty. It doesn't look good. Sometimes it looks like it's worse off than what it was before. But if you know anything about pruning, that it is something in that cutting back, that dead weight. Cutting back was not necessary. You end up getting a fuller, healthier product than what you had before. But if you don't prune, then that plant will never become or live up to its potential.
Now, this is for my pastors. Perhaps you're doing something because you think this is what you're supposed to be doing, and you saw so-and-so pastor doing it, or members in the church, this is what they want, but this is not what God called you to do. Mm-hmm. And you're holding on to it, and it's destroying not only your home, it's destroying your church.
Because, linking it back to pride is when you're not willing to let something go. You're not willing to say, hey, I missed the mark. Yes. Hey, I made a mistake. Because, see, now my self-esteem and my self-image is on the line. So now I got to ride this thing out.
Right.
And so...
And force-feeding your spouse to accept it. Mm-hmm. That's pride. You're force-feeding your spouse to accept foolishness that they know is destroying them. It's destroying them. It's hurting them. It's destroying their self-esteem. It's destroying their self-image.
One of the quickest ways to destroy your marriage is to operate in pride. To keep on doing something and holding on to something. And you know that you need to let it go. Mm-hmm. But instead of just saying, I missed the mark, I made a mistake, Lord, I thought you said, I thought I heard, whatever. You just holding on to it. Yeah. And you will take the whole ship down with it. And that's kind of what we experienced. My husband, he was going to figure out how to make it work. And this is one thing I always say. When you start trying to make stuff work yourself, and you're not leaning and depending on it, but you're going to make it happen, that's when you start running into problems. It's a difference when God has told you something. I'm not talking about not working hard.
My yoke is easy.
And his burden is light.
And that's what my pastor told me. He said, God says his yoke is easy, his burden is light.
But your yoke could take it down.
But your yoke is destroying it. You know what I'm saying? So I don't want people to take from this conversation and say, oh, here he is, he talking about I got to give him my coaching career. I'm not saying that at all.
Not saying that at all.
What I'm saying is you have to sit down and evaluate your marriage. Now,
the whole of your marriage.
Right.
All of it.
Right. Right.
You know, you got to evaluate the whole of it.
Yeah. So for example, let me give my coaches an example. Okay.
Okay.
My wife understands that as a coach because I coached at Alabama State.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in the earlier part of our marriages. So my wife understood the time and all those things that went into it. I was at a different place in my life then, and that's why I had to let that go. But here's the point: as a coach, if you know, okay, I got to spend all this time, cutting up film, doing all these different things. Okay, now. So what can you cut in your life? Perhaps it may be a relationship with you. Hanging out with the boys. Mm-hmm. That may be something that needs to be pruned. Because it's not the coaching that's destroying your marriage. It's the hanging out. It's the relationship. It's the ungodly relationships. Okay? What if you're a wife, a spouse?
Unwise use of your time.
Unwise use of your time. What if you're a wife and you're a spouse and, you may be a lawyer or a doctor. These careers require a lot of time. Mm-hmm. It may not be that with you, but it may be hanging out with mom and them. Hanging out with cousin them. Every time they go out, you got to go. That could be destroying your home. So you have to sit down and you have to evaluate it and look at, that's what Pillow Talk is about. It's about you all coming together and saying, you know what? This is destroying our home. Yeah. And I got to let it go. So that's what I had to do. Number one, I had to let go of something that was killing my marriage. Listen, that's not going to be easy. It was tough. Mm-hmm. It was hard. My apostle went before God. He said, the word of the Lord says you have to let it go. When I went in here and I told the coach I had to let it go, I had to let it go. But let me tell you something. I stood in faith. I did what God told me to do. Years down the road, God restored it. Mm-hmm. He restored it. He will restore. He will restore. Number two, I think my wife had pride.
I think we've hit our time limit. I can't see the clock. Where's the timer? I think we're... Thank you guys so much for joining us for Pillow Talk.
And I want you just to kind of...
We will tune in on... Yeah,
I just kind of want you just to mention this a little bit. I think my wife...
I went blank personally. I
think my wife issue with pride in this area was not being understanding. You need to let go. Don't you see what's going on in this house? You see it, and I think
help me with this.
Yeah, I think that was the area where she missed it because it was an area of not being compassionate, and so I think sometimes as a spouse, you got to understand. You got to let it go. You got to cut it off. You got to cut loose because it's producing death in the home. But on the flip side of it, you need to be compassionate. You need to be understanding.
Or maybe even to add to that point, maybe is the pride part is recognizing that sometimes you don't know what you think you know. And maybe there were some things that I didn't know and I didn't understand. And instead of seeking understanding, I just assumed.
Right.
And I judged. And I thought. Instead of seeking understanding. And sometimes part of pride is recognizing that maybe you don't know all that you think you know. And it took me a while because, people have probably put all kind of little messages up there. I was like, why are you so, it's grown men with tights on. They run, I don't get it. It does nothing for me. I like the halftime show and the concession stand. But I had to understand from his perspective what it meant to him. And we had to walk through that. But I first had to come down and say, maybe you don't get it. Maybe you don't understand. Now, we didn't take down in terms of that this is still causing issues in our home, but I had to step back and say, you need to hear from his perspective and hear his heart. And that's pretty much the only issue I've had in the last 18 years.
In that area, and then no.
And that was only like a day.
Yeah.
That was only, it didn't take me long now to overcome.
But that was
Jonathan, don't be looking for no comments.
But that was a main issue. And then lastly, because I'm trying to stick with my time, I'm trying to do better. You have a question?
No, we got 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes, okay. And this is the last one. We'll close out with this.
He's crazy to say if you got 2 minutes, that means you need to tell everybody good night. Because he knows if you get started, it's going to go beyond 2 minutes.
I call this one false identity. Okay. And this is trying to look outside of your home to identify who you are.
Yeah.
When your spouse is affirming who you are. You don't need to look to hobbies, relationships, careers, the church to affirm who you are. And let them tell you, because that's false pride. You should take a measure of good pride in saying, I have a sound home. My marriage is together. My family is together. My children honor me. My wife honor me. But sometimes we have what I call false identity, and that causes an ungodly pride because we're looking at all of these things. We're looking at the car I drive, the how much money I make,
the
house I live in, the career I have. You're looking at all these different things to affirm who you are, and that's false pride. And that's what me and my wife were doing.
Well, look, can we say this? That's false pride because we're talking about climbing
I get another minute.
They're climbing out of the hell in your marriage. If you're looking at all these things to attach your identity to, then you're going to do whatever you can to maintain those things, and you'll fall out of balance.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, honey. Because you're right, and that's what we were suffering with. So now you have to put on this image. You got to work extra hard. You got to work all these jobs. You got to do stuff you don't like to do because you want to try to keep up a certain image. And when in actuality, who you really are should come from the person that knows you the best, your spouse. That's all you need to affirm who you are.
You affirm each other.
And like my wife told us when we first got married, the most powerful force on earth is a husband and wife walking in agreement. I don't need so-and-so to agree with me. You just need your spouse to agree.
All right, guys. Well, this has been our pillow talk for tonight. Make sure you take a few minutes tonight. Self-assess. Talk.
Coaches, we're not talking. It may not be football.
It could be a lot of things.
It could be a lot of different things.
Take some time to talk about something that's impacting your marriage, something that you guys need to work through. You need to have your own pillow talk tonight. You be blessed, and we'll see you on next week.
Amen. Do we have any questions?
No questions tonight. Yeah.
Perfect.